Your DUSA's podcast is brought to you by First Nations Fiber. Welcome to the Beading Table with your hosts, Leith and Tekaronhiahkhwa. Our topics for tonight range all over the place, but we really get into the nitty-gritty of pricing from our perspective. We also get in deep with copying, inspiration, motivation. So join us.
First Nations Wireless is now First Nations Fiber. You've seen our team working through the community to get you connected. From the new development to the OCR, from the 207 to Clay Mountains, FN Fiber makes fiber optic internet easy for everyone. Coming to Tekaronhiahkhwa soon. Visit radio.fnfiber.com to sign up today.
Welcome to the Beading Table. This is our second episode, and it is titled, It's Not Just Dollars and Cents, How to Price Beadwork.
So for today, we chose to focus on pricing. That seemed to be a really hot topic lately. Everyone's been asking us, how do we price? And if we could give a breakdown and what our thoughts are on pricing. So that's something that we're going to focus on today. Would you like to go first, Leith? Do you have any ideas or thoughts on pricing?
Sure. So there are like, for myself, I would say there are multiple variables that really determine what it is I'm going to price. And this is all from my personal experience. Now, I would say the first and foremost thing is there's like an ebb and flow where, not to say that sometimes your beading is lacking, but sometimes you have more motivation and like it's more pizzazzy, your beadwork. And then sometimes it's just like maybe a flower here. Like sometimes you can do something huge and ornate. And then the next time it's something just small. And so it's really going to determine what your price is. Because I have to factor in materials, big beads, small beads, what kind of beads they are. And then like that, of course, it goes into like what kind of finishes the beads are. There's all different kind of things for that. And like also, depending on the brand of the bead, sometimes some beads are more expensive. Some beads are less expensive. And in terms of like the embellishment beads, if you're using crystals or if you're using precious stones, it really like brings up the price.
The gold for 14 or 24 karat gold beads.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we often forget is that those things matter, like materials, not just necessarily your beads, but if you're not charging every time for like a bottle of glue or something or a thing of thread, but that really has to be taken into account a little bit, not a little bit, a lot. If I'm being honest, it has to be taken in a lot because what happens is that's all your overhead prices or all your overhead costs in order to do this. And people don't factor that in sometimes. Some people like to just like do their
just the hours or
by the hour, which, yeah, it could be great if you're, I don't want to say a slow beater, but if you take your time. Now, someone could be a really fast beater and still have the same kind of quality as somebody who takes a lot longer. Now, should that person be using hours? I would say no. Like if you know you're a fast and quality beater, you should be using what it is that you believe is a good standard for your pricing because not everyone is going to price the same. Like you and I don't price the same. And we don't even, like we talked about in the last podcast, we don't even take orders the same way. And so you wanted to talk about that a little bit about how you take the order because you said that you don't take any money.
Yeah. I don't take any down payment. Well, some people will ask, sometimes there's like a request or whatever, because sometimes, yes, it is easier on the client not to be dropping whatever, hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars. So it is easier in that sense. But for me, the motivation is a lump sum. So it's like everybody is different in how they choose to price and things like that.
Do you keep track though of your materials?
Yes. And well, for me, how I kind of look at it or how I price some of the things is that I have almost like a standard now because I make certain things so often. I kind of have set prices for certain things. Like if I'm making a grad outfit, like depending though, sometimes, yes, you do have to take in account how much is done on the piece. Like if somebody's going to order a grad outfit, but says like completely bead the whole thing, then like the whole yoke and everything, then yeah, definitely it'll be a higher. But if it's generally like in the same area, like for a couple of orders, then yeah, it's going to be, kind of the same. So,
so do you change your price based on your expertise. So like say you did a grad order last year. Now, people are going to probably think like, oh, well, you guys are seasoned beaters and you're probably set in your style. That's not necessarily true. Like we're evolving the same way as everybody else, like just like the beginner. There might be small details that we're changing in our art form. You might not notice them as much, but we notice them. So if you are getting better and better each time, because I assume that's what's happening, would you change your price or would you stay? See, that's the tricky part is that a lot of times people get used to a certain price point and then they're caught off guard when you say, well, it's this much because I'm better. Like I'm better now. Like I have more like notches on my belt in the sense that, I've done all these things. My color change or whatnot, and you have a different eye for different things. And so I just wonder, like, do you change your price?
At some point, for me, the way I look at it, I guess that does semi-factor into it, but not like a whole bunch for me. Because this is my job, this is my income. Like I don't have a backup, you know what I mean? So to me, part of it sometimes is cost of living. So unfortunately, sometimes, you know what, even the cost of living has to factor into what I charge because this is my bread and butter. I have to pay my bills. I have to support I have a 2-income family, thankfully, but I still have my own bills. I have things that need to be addressed. So sometimes that's a major factor. Over the years, I think like things have evolved already, like a couple of times. Like I think when I first started, I maybe used to charge like, I want to say like less than $400 for a pair of moccasins, like because I didn't really know either. Like I never really factored in all the stuff. I just kind of went like, oh, well, what do you think? And over the years, yeah, I've kind of really started factoring a lot more criteria into it. So there was something that we were talking about earlier, how like years ago, you had mentioned something to me that kind of really opened my eyes about pricing. So for me, like I said, I was just kind of like, oh, well, maybe somebody will buy it at this price. And it was usually super low. And like, I felt comfortable. And of course, people were like, yeah, I'll take it because it was like giving it away for free. So I remember doing something. It was a project and I didn't know how to price it. And I was kind of getting to the point where I was like, well, you know what? No, maybe I need to start evaluating what I'm charging. Do a guesstimate, or if you do have your hours, divide that. Like, how much time did it take? And like, so what is your pay per hour that you've put into this? And I was like, I think when I did it and when I looked at the final cost of everything, it was like, I think I charged myself like $3 an hour.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So it's like those kind of things. Like now a lot of the time people will come to the shop and they'll ask me like, well, how do I price and all that? And I usually tell people that like look at the amount of hours. And like you said, it doesn't always work. It doesn't always, it is hard because like for me, I'm a fast beater. I do fast, and like you said, it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm fast and it looks like crap. Like,
yeah, you have quality work.
Yeah. And it's just through years of experience, like whatever, it is what it is. So I usually tell people like, you do have to factor it in though. If you're doing this for like, I don't know, 20 hours, like break that down and see, like, get a rough estimate. Like, are you okay with it being $5 an hour or $20 an hour, 25? Like, you have to gauge that and you have to find like some kind of medium. And if it doesn't like match up to what you feel it should be, then you also have to look at other factors like
the market, like who is your market? And I think that's important because we had talked and in preparation for this podcast, of course, we did a little bit of brainstorming and different things like that. And what we looked at was, Margaret has it on her paper because I didn't write it down, but what was the note that you wrote? Because it's hilarious.
So yes, pricing, the infamous res pricing. So what is the difference with that? Like, how do you determine, like that's a question that comes in a lot. Like, well, if I'm beading for family, how much should I charge? I'm beading for my community. How much should I charge? I'm beading for a market. How much should I charge? So there's all those factors that come in too sometimes. So,
and you can't gauge from one artist to another. You really have to have confidence in yourself and set your price for what you think it's worth. Now, am I going to say like, just go and say it's going to be $1 million? Obviously not. Like that's not the market.
Yeah.
Am I going to say maybe it's $100? Well, I think we're past the point where, like, an example, when people started doing flat work Sioux baby moccasins, the going rate was like $125 for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's too low personally.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, you know, it doesn't equate to like the amount of time you put into these moccasins and
even
whatnot.
just the materials itself.
Exactly. So would you then price those moccasins at 500 because that's what you think they're worth? Yeah, maybe, but will that market be able to sustain you at that price? Probably not. So you have to have confidence to raise your price if that's the case. You have to also be realistic and know, like, okay, you have to look at other people who are out there. And I always say there's a market for everybody, whether you're in like the 1,000 range or like maybe like mid, like maybe like between 2 and 300 range and that kind of stuff, or even in anything in between. But you have to know what you're willing to commit to in order to get the price that you want. A lot of times it's saying, sorry, I'm not going to give you a discount.
Mm-hmm.
Or, this is my price and that's where I have to stand. And sometimes it's a blow. Like sometimes because depending on your situation, if you're somebody who is maybe the only breadwinner in your family and this is your livelihood, or you're going to school and you're a struggling student and you need the extra cash because you're not working, you have to either say, okay, I'm going to sell at that price, even though I know, and it's not to say that you're desperate, but like you're in a pickle, like you really have to have the money. So yeah, like, you make exceptions. Maybe the next time you don't have to. Like it shouldn't be set in stone that this is what you're going to charge every time, because there's multiple variables. Like you said, if you're beating something that's almost entirely out of 24 karat gold and it took you the same time to make something that was just on plain white, you got to charge.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to be the same. Now, I think that some of us have like repeat buyers.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard to say to that repeat buyer, it's increased because they're a consistent buyer. Mm-hmm. But you have to, like, we're in a time when, yes, we could do trades or whatnot, but some of us have to feed families. Like you have to pay bills. Like Hydro is not collecting tobacco or not collecting like cans of beans or stuff like that. Like realistically, we have to set our own price. We have to make the market for us. Some people don't want to charge family. Cool. Don't charge,
Yeah.
And I think it's just all personal, really. Yeah. But you have to be realistic and know who's buying your work and the other people that are out there. Like it's not to be competitive in a sense, but you don't want to be lowballing the market. If you know your work is really good, and like other beaters know, like you see something that's really nice and it's beaded excellent and the cost is low. I'm thinking, oh man, like then the comparison is that it's so low that you charge something, say I charge something that's higher and the other people don't want to buy it because they know they can get it somewhere else for cheaper. But it's not even me that really suffers. It's the person who's doing the work who's not getting what it is that they deserve. And maybe they think they deserve that. And we had talked about confidence.
Yeah.
And just knowing your worth and knowing that this is a traditional art form. It's not just something you can go to university and learn how to pick up. Like you had said, how many people like invest years and years to hone their skills and maybe like sit with different people in their own community or to learn how to do that or spend time actually like paying for lessons, like in terms of like maybe attending one of your classes. That's all personal investment. You don't want to be giving your work away for $3 an hour. That is like ridiculous. And some people will take advantage. Like that's the real thing. Some people will take advantage of that and just say, oh yeah, I see that. And okay, I'll give you that like $100. But really it's like maybe worth $200. Like, yeah, it really is the artist who should really make the price. But I think if it's somebody from your community who kind of knows that this isn't just something you put on with scissors, paper and glue, like you should have some, I don't want to say integrity because I don't want to like blow off all my clients. And I'm not trying to be like pinpointing anybody because thankfully I don't really have a lot of experiences myself with that kind of stuff. And, my price is my price. And if you want to pay, okay. And if you don't, that's fine. Like no hard feelings, it's really not like.
But I think that's the main thing is that, so many people struggle with the idea with pricing. And a lot of it comes down to our own personal stuff that we deal with. Like I can't speak on everyone's behalf because I don't know everybody's ins and outs. I know for me personally, self-worth comes into it. I have been beading for almost 20 years and I still struggle at times. When I look at something, I I see all the flaws in it immediately. And then I think, well, I chose all these colors, but will somebody else like them? So those kind of things, like when you're pricing, when you're ready to sell, it's kind of like it's a little part of you that goes out to the world. Kind of you become like vulnerable to people's critique of it as well, because I made this, I put myself into this. So how are people going to respond? How are people going to react? Like,
Are they going to say, "Oh my God, you paid that much for that? That's not worth it"?
yeah.
Like I mean, like I've never heard anybody talk about other people's stuff that way. I don't think anyway. Not that I can remember, but I kind of met like it's
Yeah.
not.
But and yeah, I've never heard it, thank God, but like it does happen. I can't, I'm sure that it does. So it's kind of like it is a blow a little bit sometimes to your ego, like or it feels like it will be if just with your pricing, like, oh my God, if I price it at this, like, are people gonna say this? Or if I, so
They're putting yourself out there. You mean when you're pricing high? That's usually
no,
happens
some people
when
even
you're
like
pricing low.
even low, sometimes it's you still feel, I guess it is on the higher end, because to me, I look at it like there, I kind of look at when people price certain things, and even for me, even if like, and not in a judgment way, because there was I think it was last year, somebody had posted something that was for sale, and I was shocked at the price, and not in a judgmental way, but because I reflected on what I sell mine for. And I was like,
And we had that conversation because you texted me like,
and I
"Oh
was
my
like,
God!"
and it sold, and I was like, and the stuff was beautiful. It was high, like you know what I
Quality.
mean, high quality, everything. But I was just shocked because I'm like, I'm giving myself my stuff away if this stuff is like if her stuff is also being sold at this price, and I'm like, holy smokes, like it was an eye opener to see, like, and that's where what you're saying, the confidence comes in, because they were confident enough to say, you know what, my work is worth it. And I should ask what I feel this is worth, So, and I kind of like, it gave me a whole new sense of looking at things, where I was like, I don't want to take advantage of buyers either and say, oh my God, well, it's $10,000 for this or whatever. But I have to be realistic that, you know what, like, and it's funny because it's hard that we can't talk good about ourselves. We feel funny. Like I feel funny right now about almost just
Are you
saying
talking
like,
about beating, about pricing?
no, about like to say I'm worth it. My
I'm worth
work
$20
is
an hour.
good.
No.
Yeah.
It sounds so ridiculous that way too.
No,
But
but yeah, in the sense to say, you know what, like my beadwork is good.
Mhm.
I've worked hard. I've done it for a long time. I will blow my own whistle that yes, and by saying that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying I'm better than anybody else, but my work is good, and that's okay to say. And I think other people need to start learning how to say that and owning that, to say, okay, well, my work is good, so I should be asking what, my time is worth, especially like what we were saying, when this is a business, because that's another question that comes up a lot. Like, is it lucrative to turn beadwork or beading into a job? And it can be, but you have to immediately like set your standards as to what you're going to accept, your own.
Your own work ethic in terms of like how you're going to schedule your time. Are you going to treat it like a job? Are you going to do it like 24/7?
Mm-hmm.
And then like your basic scale, like I would say, like a lot of times what happens is that in the beginning I would have a piece and I would say, okay, this is how much this piece costs. So then I'm going to take my next piece and see like, okay, is it equal or better than what it is, or even less? Because sometimes you can just, like I said, like you're in a slump and you're just beading to bead, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's high quality, because we're not machines, right? We can't put out the same kind of stuff every time. Well, I can't anyway. You compare those two, but in the comparison, it's not just the time. It's like your bead choices. Like your bead choices and my bead choices compared to somebody else in the community are completely different.
Yeah.
And that adds to our expertise. And then also the pattern making in terms of like maybe just the shape, how you design, what goes into your design, different things like that. Like those all have to be taken into account. Now, if you have pieces if you've sold and you have pieces that you can judge, sometimes it's a good way to like make it easier for yourself. But as time goes on, you're going to get better. So you're going to have to increase your prices. I'm very confident in my prices, but that being said, I do have different prices for different places. I'm going to be honest. The different prices for places has to do with family. That's my personal choice. Sometimes I charge and sometimes I don't. It really depends. It depends on the situation. If I'm saying, oh, I'm going to make this for you, if I am saying that, then probably don't charge because I am choosing to do this for you. Now, if somebody comes and asks me to do something, then I'll charge something because it's time away. And we were talking about like what falls at the wayside, like that's time away from my family. Because if you're doing an outfit, you're doing something, and if you're working a part-time job, like if you're working at the store, or if I'm working doing whatever, you have to do it on the off time, like when you're at home, when you're supposed to be like interacting with your children, cooking supper and doing dishes and all that other stuff. And when I'm doing knee deep in a project, I can't wash my dishes until like 6 o'clock because if my hands can't get wet in terms of like they get too wrinkly and they get too sore and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I can't do dishes during the day if I'm doing a big project and I'm at home. So I do have different prices. And if you're family and you're great and it's great and I'm taking orders, then yeah, sure. I don't mind. If you're doing something and I love it, like, I'm going to say like my nieces and nephews, I don't charge. I wouldn't charge my own children. I don't charge that. Like, I wouldn't charge. And that's my prerogative. And that's the thing is that you have to have confidence. Like, I'm confident that like, I don't want to charge. I'm not going to charge. If I'm going to charge less, I'm going to charge you less. Aside from the family, there's no other determination on the res price.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows that, or not everybody, but I know in particular, there's two different prices. There's res price and there's show price. And that's just how it is.
We've all heard it too, because it's like when you go or when people have put things in shows, or even when you're thinking like, oh, okay, well, if I'm prepping for a show or a market or something like that, you're like, okay, these are the prices. This is what I can, it's almost a standard. It becomes a standard that on the outside, when you're at showings or whatever, you charge more. The thought creeps in like, well, I can't charge this at home.
That's true.
And it's true. It's the reality of it, because when you're at shows, when you're at things, you have buyers, you have collectors, you have people
other
that
expenses on top of just the actual work. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
Like you have to say, like, it's almost like when you're working at a store and you buy something wholesale and in order to sell it retail, you have to take in the factors of like, you have to take in rent, you have to take in heat, all those other things. When you're at a show, you have to take into account your travel, your expenses to live there. You have to take that into account because if you're not just going to go to a show for free.
Yeah. Or sell something for $200
and it
not
doesn't
make
even
any,
cover
yeah.
doesn't even cover a quarter of your flight or something like that. So yeah, you have to, it changes. And a show usually costs money to get in.
Yeah.
You have to pay for your table. So, and that's just how it is. And people may not be like, oh my God, I can't believe Tony's saying that. But well, it's the truth. Like, and that's where we're here. We're at the Beading Table. We're telling like how our experience is. And that's how my experience has been, is that oftentimes I do not charge the same as I do at a show. There's one piece I have that I have not decreased the price. I did decrease the price a little bit before somebody asked to buy it, but I'm not decreasing it. I really don't care. It's that price and that's what it is. And if you want it, great. If not, well, I'm going to another show, hopefully, and I'll just sell it there probably. Hopefully. And if not, then I don't. But I'm trying not to decrease because that is what I believe it's worth. And that's what I'm selling it for.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be confident and strong to say, sorry,
yeah,
I'm not going lower.
Yeah. And that's it, and it does it. That comes back to your own personal stuff where you're confident in what you're doing and you're okay with it.
But it's scary.
Yeah, it is. It is like when you're sitting on something, especially when it could be worth quite a bit, it's always scary.
Very scary.
So there was another question that a lot of people, we kind of touched on it a little bit, and it's controversial. I think it's a controversial thing, and I'm going to bring it up. So, because, that's...
I'm like, what is this topic?
No, it's within all these things, but about the beading. How do you price depending on who's beading? That is something that had come up in some of our, like a lot of people were writing that even on our, like when we put out our feelers for topics and things like that. So people were asking like, how do people determine pricing based off of expertise and years of experience? And so where like Leith has been beading for 20 plus years and somebody who has just learned so that person who is just learning, should they be pricing their stuff at the same as what you're pricing? So those are some of the questions that have come out. And some people discuss that a lot of the times. Like, I think sometimes that's where maybe judgment comes in,
Oh,
or,
okay.
you know, like, but what's the reality of it too, you know? Like for me, I personally know like where I kind of, my view on it is that if somebody can price something and they get that, they sell
Good
it,
for them.
then
Excellent.
great. Exactly.
I'm applauding you. Like,
Yeah.
that's good.
And that's exactly how I feel. So, because I find that when you price something, if you're pricing, I always tell people, you know what, not in a way to price gouge, but price it at the higher end of what you're comfortable with. Because if you price it lower and try to move up, that's ridiculous. Like it's easier to have it a little bit higher
and then
than
go down if you have
and
to.
then come down if you have to. And then that can kind of show you that it kind of gives you like a reality check, like for everybody on every level of where, you know, some of your stuff is sitting at that point. And you know what? And you can't take some of those things personally sometimes. Like that's the way it is. Like if you have something, like I've had things out there where I was like, oh my God, so jazzed about it. And then I put it out and like it's at a certain price and I'm like, oh, it didn't sell. Like, so then I know, okay, well, you know what? Maybe the quality on it, maybe the color choices, maybe whatever, I have to lower it. So those are also good gauges to look at, you know, for every level of beading. But if people like, to me, I look at it, if it's a brand new beater and they price it really high, like super, super high, if that doesn't sell, then you know, that's your cue. That's telling you where maybe then it needs to be a little bit lower until like you develop a little bit more. So, you know, build your name, build your, you know, stuff like that. So that's kind of how I kind of view it, I guess. But I'm not against people, like, I'm not against it really to say like, oh my God, well, nobody knows who this person is and she just started beating and you should, you know, like for me, I don't.
That famous line, she has no business doing that.
Yeah. Like,
which is not true.
Yeah. I kind of like, I'm on that side a little bit. I just kind of look at it like, yeah, just gauge like where price it. Like if you're comfortable, you have you're a brand new beater and you set your price at $500 and it doesn't sell. Well, then, you know, okay, let's try a different price. Let's lower it a little bit. So that's kind of where I sit on it.
And for me, I think like that's good. I don't try to get into, I don't think anybody would really, that'd be a little bit too brazen to be like commenting on somebody if they go too high. I try to make a point. If I see somebody selling something and I know them and I feel comfortable, I'll tell them, you can get more money for that. Because I think it's important to help to encourage people who don't necessarily maybe have a lot of experience selling. Say I see on Instagram, I'm like, I just want to let you know, like your work is good.
Yeah.
And I think you're not doing yourself justice.
Yeah.
You should increase your price. And then it doesn't have to do beadwork. I do it for other things. I'm just like, you know, like you're almost giving it away. I think that's one of the things that, like, one of the reasons why I have the beading table is so that we can help and to encourage people to like look and improve and do whatever with their beadwork from our point of view, what we think it should be, I guess, really, I guess. But I think it also like helps me so that I don't have to inbox people and say, hey, you know, I think you should do this. You know, and I've done that. Like I've seen something, I'm like, oh my God, excellent. Maybe if you just tweak this one little thing. And it's not to be like criticizing them. It's because they can then ask for more. Like, you know, it's the quality gets better and better. So, but I only do that to people I know who will not take it the wrong way. Because some people will take it the wrong way and take it too personally. And I'm not here to like crush anybody's dreams. Like I'm not the dream crusher. Maybe in my house I might be, but not necessarily here on the podcast.
Yeah.
But I like what you said, where you have to be like realistic. You have to see what it is. And it could be ego and maybe not. Maybe it's just like whatever it is that you have. And I think when you look at whatever's on social media, it's not always the true representation of what's going on. Maybe there's other things behind the scenes and you don't know. And I think it takes a lot to put yourself out there. It takes a lot to say, okay, because this is a direct reflection of you. Your artwork is a direct reflection. And this is what you're like saying, okay, I'm putting this out there for the masses to like look at, critique, to dissect every little thing. They see that stitch is going the wrong way and that thread is sticking out and it doesn't match, and that
you didn't hide that knot, it's still sticking out.
And my colors are too gaudy and nobody likes that. And that's like I was saying, it like ebbs and flows. Like I think on the last podcast, I said that people like the light blue velveteen, and then maybe next year it might be red. Like that might be the hot color. But you have to know who your clients are. It's not to say that you have to bead specifically for somebody if that's not what your purpose is of doing custom work, if it's just general, but you should have an idea. Like there's certain artists out there who like make earrings or medallions or stuff. I've never done this. And I always look and say, oh my goodness, why can't I just do that? They'll do repeats of the same thing. And that is awesome. Like if you have a design that people really gravitate to, and you're able to make a series like they do like with like shoes or with clothing, they just make a whole collection, right? And they make like whatever, say some artist makes 10 of something. I can't necessarily do that. Like that's not my thing. I wish I could because I think I have some pretty good designs that I've made up before, but I don't know. It's just not my thing. But I'm always so envious because it's like a consistent, you see the consistency of their artwork. More people can wear that one particular thing and different things like that. Like I think about like earrings, like a lot of people do earrings and I'm like, oh, that's so excellent. Like I wish I had that drive to do the earrings, but I don't. And also I'm staying in my lane. Like I know my lane. Like I know what I like to do, different things. And I know like that's my niche, like kind of thing. And it takes time to learn how to, it takes time to learn how to do like earrings and different things like that. I mean, I'm sure people who do them all the time, it's easy and they're like, they know where to get their supplies from and all those kind of things. For me, it's just like, it feels like it's something else I have to learn to do. And if I'm good where I'm at, then, maybe I won't learn that. And I think that's important because maybe you can be in all markets, maybe, I don't know. But for me, if I try to be in all markets, there's something that's going to slide. And it has nothing to do with the artwork. It'll have to do with my family. Like if you're trying to dip your toe into everything somewhere, the most important things, unfortunately, will fly by the wayside. And I've done that before. Like I've like dedicated all of my off time trying to get to the Santa Fe or going to the herd, worked a full-time job, beaded from like 8:00 at night to like midnight, if not later, then got up 5:00 till 7:30 to bead and then start all that. And because I'm a procrastinator by nature. And for me, I never prep for a show. So if I don't hear from the show that I got in, I'm not going to be like for the show. Like, I'm not like that. I'm not hoarding stock. So if I find out I get in, like, I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to start beading. So for me, that's how I work. Things fall by the wayside. Like you don't see your husband or you don't like, all those other things. And I'm thankful that I have family and like my husband and my kids who kind of know this is kind of, I guess it's like the routine.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's good in terms of like family dynamic and stuff like that. But I think like you have to make some sacrifices. I don't know who it was that I was listening to over the week. And they said, sometimes you just have to reach for your dreams and sacrifice a bit. That's really what it is. And if your dream is to be an artist and to do all these things, well, you have to first and foremost put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And that's hard for people. But there's so many people now who can do it because you don't necessarily have to really interact. You can do it like through social media. And then it's set, it's done. And you just say, okay, sure, perfect. I'm going to take your money and I'm going to send you these things. Like,
Yeah.
So it's really changed a lot, I think. Because to sell, you have to sell. Like if you're going to a show or you're doing whatever, if you have a store, you kind of have to like, sell the stuff and you have to be able to be confident enough to chit chat about all that stuff with a customer. So,
yeah, it's just kind of, it all wraps into like making it into a business. And how do you, that was another question. Like, how do you create it into a business or how do you, all of that? But like exactly what you said, like everything has to be really strict. You have to be a little bit strict on yourself, what you were saying about like, because really in reality, like, I'm the same way where, when grad season comes around, it's like, okay, well, dishes aren't getting done. Laundry's not getting done unless my family's doing it or the house is a dump for a few days because, what, I have to sit, I got to get this done. So it's kind of like having to learn those kind of.
You have to treat it like a job.
You definitely do. So, like those are, that even comes into your pricing, like how, everything there's, I think like everything that we just talked about, really, it was like, I guess there's no clear cut route
no
to say this is what you should price, like, or how you should price it. Because really everybody has their own factors. There's all kinds of different things that everyone goes through, your own like we said, everything is personal sometimes about your own emotions, how you feel, your self-worth sometimes. And even that sounds ridiculous, but that comes into play.
Maybe that bill that comes in and you gotta pay it, you gotta sell this thing to make that money. Like that's a reality for a lot of people, is like you said, if this is your only income and your water bill comes in and it's $100 or whatever, you're gonna try to make some, either you're gonna try to bust your butt to make something, or you're going to sell something maybe that was more, but you need that money desperately. We're really trying to be truthful. And I think one things that I would encourage people to do is not to bring anybody down. Like whatever I have, I shouldn't be looking at somebody and judging myself against them, because I'm not them and they're not me. You know, we should support each other and do all that kind of stuff. And that's true. And we should just be grateful that the art is selling, because if people are buying when somebody else is selling or has that acknowledgement, it also brings up the art form also.
Itself, overall for everybody. Yeah.
So just because you can't get a price for something and you think it's worth that much, sometimes the market doesn't think it's that much. And when I mean market, I don't mean like Santa Fe market or herd. I mean the people just in your community, maybe even who are buying. You know, like the same thing to do with, like, I sell beads. I can't be like selling them exorbitant prices if somebody else down the road sells something different for a lower price, because then it's, you know, I have to sell them for what they're worth. And if it means they're a little bit more than somebody else or even a little bit less, then that's okay. But I'm not trying to gouge and try to take that other person out of their business either. Like, so I think you have to look at it that same way. Like, yes, it's economics, but I don't know. I feel like it's like,
there can't be a standard. I think, because that's come up before too. Like, you can't put a cap or anything on art, you know, and that's what it is. And like you said, everybody's circumstances are different. Everybody's levels are completely different. So it's like, there's a lot of factors that come into it. Like for me, when I guess the bottom line of pricing for me is material cost. And it's like really a soft estimate, really, because there's all whatever. So I do material cost. I look at it like I don't charge for all the beads I use, but I do have to factor in some of that cost. Like, yes, I could be using beads that I used for the last project, but I still had to pay for some of that. So that still has to get factored in there. Leather. Like if I'm making moccasins, hello, leather is pretty expensive everywhere, you know.
And then if you have tanned hide versus commercial hide, it even changes the price. Like,
even that.
People have to, like, if you're making commercial hide moccasins versus tan hide moccasins, your moccasin itself, just a moccasin, not even the beadwork on it, is more expensive if it's tanned. So you have to reflect that in the cost, because
automatically that should be an automatic like jump up, like depending on whatever you're comfortable with jumping it up, but it should be more. The process, like, not everyone knows, but that is a major process to tan hide. Like, you have to hunt. You have to do all of that. It's all tan, like it's all done by hand. So you have to factor that in, all the work, and then what the cost is.
That's your overhead cost, because if you're not tanning the hide yourself, then you have to buy it from somebody.
Yeah, and it's a lot. So those are like the materials, your leather. Velveteen is not cheap either. Like, small pieces are not cheap. Like, you're paying, you know, like $40-50 sometimes for like some of the better quality velveteen US on top of it. It's not all Canadian prices. So, you know, you kind of look at that. Like, these are some of the things I talk about when people ask, like, well, why are things so expensive?
So people ask you how much things cost?
Not me, not about my work.
Oh, okay.
But sometimes you have people who have an appreciation in a sense, but don't necessarily know what goes into all of it.
Okay.
You know, so it's kind of like giving them that clarity to say, well, look at the beads. Like, I recently had a class where I had to provide the materials, and they asked for a moccasin making class. And I had to, you know, I said, you want me to provide like the materials? I said, are you aware of the cost of the materials to make a moccasin? I'm like, that, because that could be about $200 to $300 just in materials alone per person. If they're just starting out, if they don't have all this stuff. And if you're asking me to make a kit, I have to provide all of these things. I'm like, that's a high cost right away. I said, the beads alone could be like $100, you know? So anyways, so those are all like different little things that I always factor in, like all of your materials, your hours, which is which is hard, like, because if you are, like, in the sense you were saying, if you're a slower beater, you could rack up a lot of money, like, you know, which
if you
is
charge per hour. Yeah.
if you charge, which is great too. But then if you're a faster beater, you're totally shortchanging yourself. So you have to kind of have like a gauge in there. I like to do the breakdown, like to say, okay, well, I'm going to charge $500 for my moccasins. But then I look at like, oh, well, you know what? I did about maybe 100 hours. Like, what does that come down to? You know, like, did I really, whatever. So those are rough estimates of how I price.
What about quality? Because there was a question that came in. Somebody said this is like, the question was, and this is a direct quote from Instagram. So if you're the Instagram follower who said this question, then thank you so much. It says, and it got a lot of replies too. Do you ever look at someone's beadwork and notice the looseness? Which really ties into our topic of pricing, because it really goes in with quality. Now, I'm not going to lie. I noticed loose. I've also beaded loosely when I had my piece turned backwards and I didn't see what it was. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Am I like judging somebody who does it? No, because that's what you're at. Like, that's where the person is. That's what it is. Like, you know, but do I notice? Yes. Has Margaret come and said something and said, hey, look at that. I made this thing. And I'm just like, yeah, you see this little thing here? I'll say that. Has other beaters come and said, yeah, look at, oh, you got this thing here right there. Yeah, sure. Like, you know, like that's like that tough skin too. Like how are we going to learn if we don't ask or somebody doesn't teach us to know better that, you know, if you knot it this way, or if you do this, like, you know, like you can up your expertise and quality by just making it tight and not loosey. Like,
yeah. And for real, like I
like so let me ask you this question. Do you ever notice someone's beadwork and notice the looseness?
And again, it's not in a judgmental way, but I look at your beadwork. I look, not you specifically, but all of you beaders, everyone out there, I look. And it's not in a judgmental way. It's to see where things are at, how people are doing, like their growth journey on their beading thing, because we've all gone through it. Like, hell, I was just looking at a pair of moccasins that I did maybe even just 10 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, these are awful. Like, and that's only just 10 years ago, you know, like it is a long time, but still, you know, like things evolve and develop like quick. But that's what I do. I do look at people's work. I look at their finishings because I have, and sorry, I'm going to call out one of our other bead workers.
Attention, all bead workers, calling out.
So Merit Cross is always in my head. And I'm sure she's in everyone else's head. Because if you have ever taken a class with her, you know what? She helps you to raise your standards in that sense that she is in your head to say, check your finishings. If you don't like what is on there, you need to rip it out. Do not settle for something that is mediocre. If
you were right the first time, is what I say.
Exactly. So those are things that are in the back of my head, you know. You too, like, I remember when I was like starting to elevate my stuff, where I was starting to like make like more like the clothing, moccasins, things like that. And my finishings, like, I know you're a stickler for your finishings, and it's true. Like, you do this big, beautiful piece and then you got knots hanging all over the place. It looks sloppy. If your things aren't matching up, it looks sloppy. So those are things, because I have gone through that process. I have gone through looking at my own quality of work and things like that. And of course, I'm still, you know, working on those things. I can't say that, oh, yes, I am above everyone and I got high quality, because no, you know what? Sometimes it's not. Like
it's not. Yeah. Sometimes my stuff isn't like that too.
Yeah. There's just those times. So, but yeah, they are, you know.
So you're a looker.
I'm a looker. I am a looker and I'm a feeler. I'm going to pick up your stuff and I'm going to push on.
But are you a zoom inner?
I am a zoom inner.
Oh my God, we are completely different beings in this aspect, because
and it's not like it's not.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not saying like, oh my God, her stuff is awful or what. It's not in that
just
sense.
Like what you said, you're just taking a reading of what's out there.
Yeah, I like to inspect things, but that's just me on my creative artist side too. Like, I'm the same in paintings, in drawings. I'm the same thing, because it's not even just about critiquing or looking at like where people fall short. It's also looking at where I can improve. Because you know what, if I'm looking and I'm zooming and I'm checking it out, I'm seeing different quality. I'm seeing where people are elevating their stuff or their finishings are super on point or those are also things that I'm looking at. It's not that I'm looking for all the negative
Yeah,
or
you're
all
not
the
looking for defects or
no,
nothing.
yeah. And even if I am looking at the negatives, like the things that maybe you can improve on, I look at it and I kind of think like, okay, if I'm thinking that this needs to be improved, I need to make sure that my stuff is not
exactly.
like if I'm going to be like looking at it and saying, okay, well, yeah, maybe like this needs a bit of an improvement, like, well, then I better check and make sure my stuff's on point,
Well, yeah,
so
because somebody could be doing the same thing for you.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like in that sense where it's more of a learning process. It's not really a whole judgment or like, oh my God, you're awful kind of thing. It's just like it's neat. It's human nature just to it's a comparison, I guess, in a sense. So
And for me, I'm a total scroller. Like because if I see something, oh, that's nice, scroll. Oh, that's nice, scroll. Like and then and then now what people have come to do is they share beadwork over and over again because it's beautiful. Like, like stuff, and people do good work and maybe that's for sale or whatnot, but people are sharing more. So I'm like, oh, scroll, because it's the same thing, scroll, scroll, scroll again. I think it's my own thing because, and this is another like hot button topic, but it's not what we were going to talk about, but it's something that
I think
just
we're
comes
going
up.
there. Yeah.
But I don't ever want to be labeled a copier. Like that's one of my things. Like I don't want to look too much. Not to say that that's my fallback or anything. Like that's what I'm known to do, because I don't think I am at all, unless I'm taking a course and the design was given to me, then that's what it would be. But I don't ever want to have that on me. Like for myself, I just don't want that. So I try not to look at anybody's thing. Like I look, oh, I still got, like, and I can appreciate that. And
it's almost like you don't want it imprinting on you. Like
exactly. And what is interesting, and it's probably kind of bad, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I often sometimes don't like people's stuff in the sense that I like it, but I don't physically push the button to say like.
Yeah.
Because again, it's that same thing. Like, I don't want to be lingering too long. And it sounds so ridiculous. But I mean, if it's like Instagram, I'll like it privately and I'll inbox them and do it privately. And I try to be consistent. If I like, if I love, like I try to say, oh, excellent job, or I love it, or whatever. I try to make it very generic because I also don't want to hurt somebody's feelings if I happen not to like somebody's thing, like physically press like.
Yeah.
Because, like I just sometimes don't see that. Or maybe like, it's so long ago that I didn't have a chance to like it, or different things like that. Like, and that has to do with like judgment kind of thing. Like, I don't want anybody to perceive me as a copier or somebody who like wants to bring somebody down, or just raising up everybody's like blowing smoke up somebody's ass. Really, like no, like I say, and this is my like mantra is there's a market for everybody, and so you just take it how it is, and that's that. But yeah, I don't want to be ever accused of a copier, so I purposely scroll, don't linger.
But it's true.
I'll zoom on yours, or like, okay. But I don't.
I'm blocking you now.
I'm blocking you. But so this is something that I do, is that if I see something that Margaret does, I tell her, I really like that. Do you mind if I try that?
Yeah.
Or I'll say, and because you brought up Merritt's name, if I see something that Merritt did, I'll say, oh, like, I think that's a really good idea. Do you mind if I do that? And it's just because I know them personally, and I feel it's just a way to do acknowledgement that, like, I'm not asking permission, but I just I know what people are talking about, because people come to the shop and talk, or inbox me and talk about like what they see and what they think people are doing and stuff like that. And I'm not really about that business, like I really don't wanna. And
I think really it comes down to a respect for everyone. And that's what it is that to say, you know what, as a beater, I know the time it takes. And I know that, you know what, even it goes into the emotional aspect of it, that sometimes when somebody beats something, they're going through something. There's a process to why it came out the way it did, the colors that it is, the whatever. That's, again, it goes into like your own, this is a part of that person that is being expressed and being shown to everybody. So I think it's more of a sense of giving them the respect to say, you know what, like, I see what you do or what you've done. I really like it, and it's inspiring me to kind of pull something out of me too. So when you acknowledge them, when you talk to them and just say, you know what, like, hey, do you mind if I try this out? But make it your own, and not like, can I carbon copy it, And sometimes people do that too. But you know what? Even if you're doing that, check in, ask like if they mind or don't mind or whatever, you know. It just kind of gives those people, or it gives everyone respect, just to say like, I acknowledge that this is what you're doing, and it does resonate with me. So I would like to give it a try and see where it takes me, or you know. And it's simple as that sometimes.
And some people might think it's totally hokey to do that. That's good. I mean, not that I say good, but it's everybody's prerogative. And I think too, a lot of it is that we have to remember that beadwork evolves.
Yeah.
You know, like
definitely.
When somebody might post, and I'm going to say his name because he posts a lot and he's a friend of ours. And when Grant posts all of like the collection of beadwork you see, like for old beadwork that he collects, and it's beautiful. You see the similarity between them. And sometimes I'm not sure if they're always the same nation that does them, but you see, and even if it's the same nation, it's not always the same person. So you see the similarity from that region. And that's what's happening now is people are taking classes and doing things and you see a similarity. Now that's one thing that's great, you know, it's evolving. Sometimes people say, well, they're copying, but like, where else they're going to get inspiration from? Like you said, like if you're not carbon copying and you're getting inspiration, like people were saying, like that's a fine line. And when is it one thing and when is it the other? I think it really depends on, like, if you see something that is a blatant copy of what you made, I think you have the right to say, you know what, I really spent a lot of time doing that. And I can see that that is exactly what I did. I don't really, I don't appreciate that. And I think that's okay to say.
And everybody is different. You know, some people, it doesn't bother them. And that's totally fine. That's awesome, actually, if it doesn't, because like I've made posts about these things and it is a fine line, you know, about people were wanting clarity, like how do you define copying and what's the difference and all of those things.
Claiming ownership over universal stuff. That's something too, like, you know, like celestial domes. That doesn't belong to me.
No, that's an inherent right, you know, like that's you can't. There's certain things that I don't feel comfortable saying that anybody can do that, you know, to take complete ownership over. So when it comes to like copying or inspiring or things like that, like your ego takes a blow sometimes. It is an ego thing. And sometimes you do need to have it checked. Like even for me, you know, I've had things where I'm kind of like, oh my God, like I've had that done to me on a higher scale.
Okay.
You know, like where I was fully aware that inspiration was mine and it was just color changed.
Oh, okay.
And in the beginning, I was fine with it. I was okay until it continued to go further, and then it got more hype, and it was like in everybody's face, and this person was getting all of this like praise and all, and it was an ego blow for me because I was kind of like, excuse me, like,
hello, I'm over here.
Yeah, that's how I felt, you know. So I had to check my ego to say, okay, is this something I can let go? Because am I only reacting out of my ego? Is it okay to just react out of my ego? You know, like, am I comfortable with just saying, well, hell no, you know, like, so I did have to do that. And honestly, it took me about 3 years to confront the lady. So I eventually did, and we hashed it out, you know, and not in a bad way. We did, we talked about it. Things were discussed and things were put to rest. So I kind of got that clarity and all of that from there. But that was, for me, I think when I see somebody blatantly carbon copying somebody's stuff, it kind of triggers that feeling that I had where I was like, because on top of it, when, you know, here's my hokey pokey side again, but it's kind of like when I did that, I was going through some stuff and that was an expression of the times and what I was feeling and what I was going through and whatever. But to see it now everywhere else and somebody else taking ownership over it, I was like, what in the hell? Like, you know, like, it was like a kick to the gut after a while where I was just like, no, it's still bothering me. After all these years, it's still like a little twist of that knife in the gut where I was like, okay, no, it is time to address it. So,
and I think maybe just to talk a little bit about that is that because we're in a time of like social media and everything is instant, everybody can see, we couldn't see necessarily some of the things from before. Like, you know, you have like a little bead group and whatever, like that's it. Like, you know, you're just doing your beads and you don't necessarily see everybody else's work. And not to say this has nothing to do with really copying, but just being in terms of what we were talking about before about acknowledging and stuff like that, is that now you can see work from all over the world, all over the Haudenosaunee country, and different things like that. And you can take bits and pieces and stuff like that. And then you can even see like collections from hundreds of years, like 100 years ago, and you can take pieces from that too. So I think we have to remember that today's beaders are not the first beaders. Like, somebody had talked about that, and everyone comes from somewhere, and everyone has a starting point from someplace, and it's a build. It builds on top of each other, like one bead at a time, pretty much. It evolves. And before it used to be flat work. Now we're doing raised bead work. Before we were doing quill work or moose tufting and all those things. And it evolves and evolves and evolves. And at some point, not on purpose, there will be repetition because it's been done for hundreds of years, and you're going to see it. And it's not necessarily, it's new to you, but it doesn't mean that it's new to everybody. No. It could have been in their community, somebody does that. Yeah. And so you have to take that into account too. You have to realize, like, yes, you might think that this is what you made up out of no like malicious intent or something. It could be something else somebody else did, but you didn't even know, and you just happen to have the same idea, and that is okay. And I find that's where people should be prosecuted for that either.
Yeah. And I think that's where it comes into like what you were saying about not wanting things to imprint on you when you're going through social media, because it's true. Like when you're scrolling through, you know what, like my news feed is always full of beadwork because I have a lot of people that I follow that are beaders. So there is an influence in the sense that I am being shown certain colors, different colors all the time, so it's like, okay, well, oh my God, this person just did purple. It's kind of like, well, that's going to sit in your head. You're going to, so, and it's not a bad thing, like, I think, and that's where it comes into like the definition or fine line between copying and getting inspired. Like if you do a purple flower today and then I'm like, oh my God, that was beautiful. Well, tomorrow I make a purple flower. That's inspiration. That's not,
you might just be gravitated to it because that's where your mind goes.
Exactly.
It's the last thing you saw.
To me, I don't think that's, to me, like if you're copying, if you want to be called out for copying or things like that, or if you're looking at it that way, like just don't carbon copy something. Like if you're taking somebody's full on color scheme, if you're taking on their full on
pattern of in terms of like how their flowers look and different things.
Yeah, the whole layout, everything. Then well, you might be setting yourself up for like confrontation. Somebody might address you on it, and it is what it is sometimes. Like, and we all get involved. Like, even I'm sitting here saying, well, but I've had to process my own things like sometimes because I've had sometimes where I look at somebody's beadwork and I feel like, oh,
you copied me. That's what when somebody wrote, you copied me arguments. How do you deal with it? And I think you did really good by saying like what your perspective, what it was is it wasn't instantaneous. It was like what you thought, and you really had to process the whole idea because
I didn't want to just jump to conclusions, and I didn't want to just be like,
which is easy to do. I mean, it's easy to do that, just to be like,
and
sometimes it might work because if you were like, I mean, and that's like prerogative, right? Like if you really are upset about this because you all the things that you talked about in terms of like where you're coming from, how much time you invested and all this stuff, and somebody does it, it is like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, to me, you know why? Because I look at it too, like I see everyone is inspired. Everybody is inspired. There's not one person that can sit there and say that I have never
got inspiration from something
or someone else.
Yes.
Like it's a natural thing. Nobody can say that. But for me, honestly, before I react, sometimes I have a mental checklist, I guess.
You have a checklist?
Yeah. Sometimes It sounds ridiculous, but in my head.
Inspire me. I'm closing my eyes, everybody. I'm closing my eyes and I'm going to be set in like Margaret's brain. And this is how she goes about it.
Okay, so sometimes my checklist is like, say I'm looking at social media and I see somebody's moccasins or I see somebody's...
No, JK.
Yeah, no, I mean in the sense like, and I see their stuff and I'm like, oh my God, it looks like mine. And then you jump to the conclusion like, oh my God, they copied me or whatever.
And then you send the picture to somebody else.
Yeah, and all those things. But I look at it like, okay, well, say it's fall time, like...
Perfect example.
Okay, I just did a sunflower, and oh my God, now Leith did a sunflower. So, and I'm like, okay, what's the rationale here? Like we're both in the same season now, oh my God, they did moccasins. Well, do I own that? So those are little things that sometimes and it sounds ridiculous, but you know what? Sometimes we like to jump the gun sometimes. I do it. Like a lot of people do it. So I have to sometimes talk myself down and look at the reality of the situation. Like, am I trying to boost my ego too? Sometimes, am I trying to boost my ego by saying that they're copying me? Like
puff up your feathers a little bit.
A little bit, so sometimes that's in my checklist. Like, all right, am I just like putting myself on this pedestal thinking like, oh my God, everybody wants to copy me, So that's another place that I try to put myself at. I can see inspirations. I can see when I've inspired somebody, but I teach.
Yeah, you have a class.
I have a class. So of course I'm going to see a lot of my flowers somewhere. And I don't mean it's like but I mean the
kind of flowers that you actually taught in your class.
Yeah, because like I could see the drawing because like, hey, if your petal's off just a little bit, I know it's off a little bit because I came off the line a little bit when I drew it, like stupid things like that. Yeah. Like I can see those little things. So I see that, so that's an inspiration that, whatever, it's there because I teach. I put that out there. So,
and I think like in terms of like you're just talking about like if you see a flower and it's off a little bit, people need to realize like you can take patterns and you manipulate them to make them even better than maybe what your teacher gave you. Yeah. Like in this instance, maybe. Yeah. Or change, like maybe it's not a round flower, you make it pointy flower, but it's kind of this, you have the same fundamental shapes and starting off point, but you just make it different. I think in terms of like when you talk about copying, people sometimes are like, well, that's the kind of shape that I make out of this thing and all that kind of stuff. And because it really gets into like, you can copy colors, you can copy designs, you can copy the actual shape of the piece, you can copy the same kind of fabric. There's so many areas where you could copy.
Yeah.
If you start your petal from the top or you start your petal from the bottom or the leaves and all that kind of stuff. And somebody had also written, and maybe there's like, I mean, it's interesting because we talked about pricing it, just like jumping off to all these other stuff. But I mean, we can always come back to it at another podcast too. But it said the importance of sharing patterns for moccasins, frames, cuffs, yokes, purses, etc. And not necessarily designs, just the actual pattern itself. Like some of the things we don't make now, people made a lot before, like because like if there are souvenirs, people make trilobes or they make scissor holders or canoes or the horseshoes and different things like that. So that's part of the history of beadwork. And I think if somebody asks you if you can share, I think that's kind of important.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, let's go into that. Sharing and versus not sharing. I think it's
important. And we had again, Grant Jonathan came here to Gunawaga to sell velveteen and whatnot. And he gave us an old trilobe piece and he said like, make a pattern of it and then distribute it to like whoever wants it. And so we had it at Traditions and like I cut them all out and I said, if you want it, then, come and get it. And if you, whatever, like, it's for everybody because a lot of people don't do that anymore. And it was a big piece. It wasn't just some small piece. And I think what happens is that, and I'm only speaking not even from experience because I don't have any experience in this area because I don't have anybody in my family who does beadwork or historically did beadwork. I think what happens is that it's part of your family legacy, like patterns and stuff. And it's good to like acknowledge that and to be able to feel proud about that. But what happens is that, and I think this person was alluding to hoarding, but they didn't say, but hoarding patterns and not letting anybody try to make them because it's more like a possession rather than maybe a part of the historical art form of beadwork. And feeling like, well, this is what my grandparents did or whatever. And like I said, I don't have any experience with this. And maybe I'm just talking right out of my ass. And maybe everybody has that up. Maybe everybody who's doing that, they have reasons for it. And that's cool too. But like I'm saying, like this is from a perspective of somebody who's not even involved. And luckily, like I have a good solid beading community and I share and they share. I mean, I don't have a lot of patterns I share, but I try to do what I can and different things like that. But I'm also hounding people. Like I'm not telling like, hello, here I am. Come and get all my stuff because I don't have time really, like, to be giving all of my strength to everybody to give them the stuff. Like if you like, it's just like other stuff. Like if you really want it, you're going to find it. You're going to go and you're going to get it. And you're going to like, you're going to tell your story to whoever it is has it. And if they don't give it to you, then maybe they can find somebody else. But like, so that was the person's thing is just talking about the importance of sharing patterns. And we can get into it if we want, or we can wait for another time, but it's not even the design aspect. which you must come into with your beat as a teacher. Like you're giving that design out, and so
Yeah. And that's a whole, I'll just briefly, I guess, give mine because that's a whole other thing. There's a lot
like
of
sharing patterns or the design.
all of it, I
Okay.
guess. But for me, I think to me, it's like each their own, like I have, not that I have to, but I guess I'm a little bit neutral on the whole situation. Like I kind of always just sit in the middle of everything. Like I listen to both aspects of me. I don't want to say an argument, but like views. It's people's prerogative if they want to share. Like if they want to share, then they want to share. And if they don't, then they don't. Like,
what do you say about the person who says, well, this is the art of Haudenosaunee or whatnot, and it's going to die if you don't do it? It's almost like language. What do you say about that?
if you're the last person holding that, then yeah, that's like pretty shitty. But like then yeah, to a certain extent, I don't know, maybe because I'm an artist, like if I see something, I can recreate it. Like I can draw
like you
it.
got that. You got yeah.
So I guess in that aspect, I look at it like that. Like yeah,
Like
which
you're
is
not waiting for somebody to hand you the stuff.
yeah, and it's kind of shitty too in a sense because it's like, oh well, you have this, you don't want to share. Well, I'll just draw it. Like I can just draw it. Like I don't.
That's your superpower.
Yeah, I don't think I would just steal it from someone and do it if they asked me not to. Like I wouldn't just do it, but I can. So I don't know. To me, I just view it like, whatever. But if they don't want to share it, it's, yeah, there is a fine line. Like if now you're tossing that into the mix, like
what?
Like gatekeeping basically and like holding back stuff from everybody, then, it kind of goes back.
This is not like designs like flowers and that kind of thing. We're just talking
even
about
just
shapes. Shapes.
It just shapes. I don't know. If you want to share it, share. If you don't, you don't have to. Like, I had this discussion with other people where it was kind of like sometimes people you just don't want to, and it's not about like wanting
like some people are private.
They're private. Sometimes it's work. Sometimes it's work to have to do even just a shape. Like, you just don't want to do it, and that's fine.
On the opposite part of that is sometimes it's really emotional. Like if that was your mother's livelihood.
Yeah, and it's a piece of them that you're giving to somebody else.
And she's sewn them clothes because like a lot of times what happens is people would sew patterns like with a small piece of string. They would put it through all the pattern. They would sew and it would be tied. And then you're like, well, I don't want to cut that string and just, you know what I mean? Like, so,
yeah.
So it becomes emotional. Like I get it. Like, but this is just a question. And that's why I brought it up because it kind of goes into like what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Like
it's a fine line, I guess. It's another thing. Everything's a fine line these days, but it really is.
No, nobody ever wants to offend anybody.
Well,
where are the days when you could just blow somebody off?
In some ways, like not that I don't care, but like, hey, if the shoe fits, I'm gonna say it, that kind of thing. So, but I kind of just feel like,
I mean, the loosely beaded moccasin.
Yeah, if it fits, then whatever. But I kind of look at it like this, like in a sense, like sometimes people will ask me for a shape that I've done. And depending on what it is, I'll share it. I don't mind. But like that, like right now I'm working on my daughter's yoke. And I've had a few people see it. And I've had people ask for it, the shape of it.
Oh. And
I was kind of like, oh, no. Like I'm not ready because
she didn't wear it yet, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, she didn't wear it yet. It's not finished yet, and really I'm like thankful that somebody really liked it, that they asked for the shape, like I'm glad that, okay, well, yeah, somebody approves of it. That's great. I'm not ready yet to let it go. Maybe when she's done wearing it, maybe when it's done being viewed and seen, like in a way, I want it to be special.
Yeah,
I want it to be special when I decide to reveal it, when she wears it, After that, maybe if I feel better about it and I'm like, okay, it's the specialness has worn off, then okay, maybe I'll share the pattern. Yeah. But right now I'm not ready. Yeah. So, and I think that's where I kind of understand the prerogative of people not always wanting to share things. Like
you don't have to.
And you don't have to, yeah.
Like I have pieces that I've beaded that I haven't shared publicly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's because I don't want somebody to copy me. And sometimes it's because it doesn't belong to me anymore. Like a client's privacy.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be putting out everybody's thing and then people like, like I really don't want to, like a client, like I think it's like privacy in terms of like how much people pay her, if they don't pay her, all that stuff. And then that is their thing. And like they ordered it for a special thing and I don't want to be just throwing it out there. And
Yeah.
for everybody to
Exactly.
see and to copy. And then it's like there's 20 of them. And just to clarify is that I joke with Margaret is that people don't really copy my stuff. People probably just don't really like it. I don't know, but I don't see it and whatever. But, maybe you could copy me. No, just kidding. Just kidding out there, bead world, whatever. But and get inspired and
I have
all
seen your
that kind of stuff.
inspirations out there. So,
Well, I haven't because I'm scrolling. I'm
Yeah.
not zooming in on anybody's stuff.
And which is fine too. Not judging. No.
Not judging.
Actually, no. You know what? Yeah.
Actually, no, you judge?
I no, like in a sense, sometimes, like I said, like sometimes I go there right away, like, oh my God, they stole this or they stole that. Like, I'm
We're
a
getting
human. We all do it.
real deep.
No, but everyone does it, like you have to be truthful about it and you got to own it. Like, and like you said earlier, like if somebody does that, if it bugs you enough, address it.
Address it, yeah. That's all there is to it.
The other topic that we had was how do you work through a slump?
I'm just gonna say it because it's the reality, and you just kind of have to pull off the bandage and do whatever. So, my father recently just died last week, and yeah, but you don't have to send condolences or anything. I mean, I hate to say that, but like I'm just giving it giving it life because that's what you have to do in situations like this. You have to come to the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what happens to me often, and I'm sure it must happen to a lot of people, and then some people it maybe goes the other way, is that sometimes you really can't bead. And I just got really, really sick to my stomach just now, just thinking about it. So yeah, so I know I'm not ready to do the beadwork. So for me, it's happened twice now in my life, or maybe 3 times where I've suffered a loss and I wasn't able to do beadwork for a little bit. Now the timeline, I'm not 100% sure what it was. And I think it's just like when you're dealing with emotion and different things like that. For me, sometimes I can bead just random things, but I can't bead custom things because it's for somebody, Sometimes I've worked through loss by making something for the person who is deceased. And that's one thing. And it's all like circumstantial. It depends on like what the situation is. But I just, like I said, like I just got that feeling like, God, I feel like sick. And I haven't beaded anything. I don't even know if I beaded anything prior. I did. So like I haven't ran either. I ran Thursday, the day I found out he passed, and I could only run like 2 kilometers. I haven't ran yet because I think that something's going to happen. And I think the same thing is that not that I want to pay homage or to do anything like that, like for my father who died by not doing anything. But I think like, regardless of the relation in terms of like, if it's your mother, your sibling or a friend, or it doesn't matter what the relationship is, you really have to take time to like go through what it is you need to go through. Mm-hmm. And so I would say I'm in a beading hold. I don't know if I'll be in a slump when I finish the hold, though. That's a thing, because I think it's 2 different things. Like once I feel like I'm ready to bead, I'm not sure if I'm going to even, like, I don't even know what the project I was working on is going to look like now after all this. And like, even just thinking about it, it just like gives me a headache. Like that's what it feels like. And when you're talking about like, what do you do when you do, how do you get through a beading slump? One of the questions somebody had asked was, when creating or meditating through craft has brought you through hard times. So I would technically say this is a hard time. And even my head is just tingling just thinking about it. It's so like, whatever. And I'm not trying to like bring anybody down. Like, it's just part of the reality of being alive is that this is what happens. And I think for this instance, the hard times doesn't equate to me being able to be doing anything. Now, how will I get inspiration to get past this? It's probably just going to take a little bit of time. But I think sometimes, like in other times, beading through hard times might have meant like beading something because like I really had to make money. Like, like I had to take, like, that's like another reality is that like before I didn't work, my husband just worked and I didn't have a full-time job. I would take on projects because I had to make money. But it was like hard times because they're like hard times and the stress, like emotionally and time-wise, you're like be strapped and you have to just keep going. It doesn't matter. And then you have those projects where it's just like a meditating spot where you can just channel everything you have into that piece. And that could also be a slump. Like, it doesn't mean you have to be not beading. You could just be in a slump where you just can't like get past these kind of colors. You're just stuck in a spot where you just keep making the same thing because it's comfortable and it feels good and you know you can do it, and you're not putting yourself out there and challenging yourself. So, I mean, that's like, I know I got to get out of this slump by April because I got stuff to do, but it's just like, I don't know, like, it's just, I don't know. I have the beadwork at my house and I don't even want to touch it, but I don't mind like putting beads in a tube or whatever, like that kind of stuff. But I just have a lump in my throat. I just have a hard time breathing and I just can't do anything like that. So, I mean, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
How about you? I don't even know what your question was. Something to do with the slump. Like, I'm just totally out to lunch, but I can still keep going. But I'm just like, oh, what the?
It was, how do you work through a slump?
So how do you work through a slump?
Yeah, I don't know. It's all circumstance. It depends on what's going on and what the slump is, I guess. And you're in the sense like what you're talking about. I think there's like different levels of slumps. Like right now, you're going through something heavy that needs to be processed. Like it's an emotional, everything that has to get processed. So, in those cases, for me, I just give myself the time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like beading almost becomes a therapy in a sense for me. So sometimes I'm the opposite. I'm the complete opposite, where if I'm going through a hard time, that's usually when I can bead more. Because then it's my outlet.
Like you're checking out into a beadwork and being productive in that way.
And it's kind of like what you had said earlier, like about it's I don't necessarily bead for somebody else though when I'm in that space, because like I just think back to our our ways and what we that
like
we're not
cook when you're angry kind of thing. It goes into the pot and then everyone it's just a bitter feeling.
So I don't really necessarily, especially if I'm beading for a child, I don't want to be like putting all kinds of heaviness on that. So in that sense, I don't normally bead. If it's something that's really heavy, then I do have to let people know, like I'll probably need an extension, or I may just not be able to do your order because I just can't do it. So sometimes there's those circumstances when it's just a slump where I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I don't have the drive. I don't want to do it. Like sometimes you just gotta pull up your pants and do it. Like
thread that needle.
Thread it and do it. And sometimes it could take me weeks to finish, I don't know, like a medallion or
but
something.
You could have done 2 pairs of that's the weird thing about a slump, is that you could be a slump on one project and make 2 other things that help you to bring you out of the slump of that other project you're running away. I'm going to use loosely say running away from, but that's what happens.
Because honestly, I think like a lot of the times my slumps are when it's like things that I just don't want to do, like, and I have to do it, and it's not necessarily the person that ordered it, or it's usually an order. It's when it's an order that I don't want to do anymore, like where I feel obligated, I feel responsible that I have to do it, then I don't want to do it. I don't know. It's ridiculous, but that's the way it is. And it's hard. It's really hard. And I find like for me, it's like the odd, weird things that happen. Like I look at last year where I was like, I had to get things done. And then all of a sudden I'm getting like tendonitis. Oh. And I wasn't beading that much. So I can't really necessarily say it was like just me beading that created it. Or was it just like subconsciously where I was like, all right, let's get hurt because I don't want to have to do this, like something stupid like that. But that's how I feel sometimes, where I'm like, okay, what am I like creating for myself here? Because it's like, it's a push, or I feel sick to my stomach. Like, oh, I don't want to do this. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore, So sometimes it's just taking time, like you said, doing another project, something small, like where it's not going to take me 10 years. Something small. Sometimes I'll go buy new material. Sometimes I'll go look at new beads for no particular project or any reason. I just need something to pull me out of it and give me some kind of an inspiration. Then I can kind of jump back to that project and do little bits as I need to as we go along. But it's not a nice feeling. Like everyone goes through it. Like, how do you pull yourself out and stuff like that? And for me, I think the best thing is to take a minute, take that breath. Like, just, you got to stop. If you don't want to do it, stop, because you're going to end up creating something else.
Well, I think too, like when I have a slump that's not related to like anything emotional or anything like that, sometimes what I do is I find a new show.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, And I just think like you just need to like, or not even a new show. I probably watched the same show that I've watched before where I've had success in completing a project because it's like you're getting the rhythm and things like that. So sometimes I use that. Like I'm not necessarily even just being inspired by actual like a thing. I'm just watching a TV show or I just a place of comfort, I guess maybe is really that, and maybe consistency. Like that's the thing. Like, you know, when you're in a hard time, not to forget that things are happening, but to be consistent in what it is you're doing. Like, you know, you get up, you got to eat, you got to do this other stuff, you know, like trying to do that kind of stuff. And a lot of people take like beading sabbaticals just because
they need to.
They're burnt out, you know, and I think that too has to play like not necessarily in pricing, but just having that grace for yourself to be like, okay, you know what, like I really have to just take a time and I just can't be creating anything, because then what happens usually is that after a while you feel better and then you start maybe creating something completely different or maybe the same or whatever, like, you know, so.
I think some advice too, I would have to say for somebody who has to do a project that has a deadline or you want to do this as a career or things like that. I think you need to have, like you said, the consistency a little bit. You need to create a routine out of it. If you're struggling to do something, you know what, choose a time. Say, you know what, today I'm going to bead for 20 minutes. For this week, I'm going to bead for 20 minutes and make yourself do it. It's the same like changing a diet. It's the same as exercising. You have to kind of put it back into your, because I find for me, sometimes when I go into a slump is when, you know what, I'm super busy with the shop or life or my kids or something like that, where I don't have the time to bead. It takes me like longer to jump back into it. So I find the consistency and just keeping a little bit at a time in there helps you to feel like, okay, it's part of the routine now. It's just something that I do at this time. I'm going to sit and I'm going to do even 20 minutes. And then you can extend it if you're feeling better about it. And make sure that you have that downtime too, though, to say, okay, well, yeah, this feels like a job. Let me take like the weekends, I'm not doing it. You know, something like that. Like try to keep it. And eventually it'll pull yourself out of it, you know. But,
And I think maybe for me, for if someone's starting a new project and is not coming out of a slump, but just starting a new project, is that I would say, if you don't have the design yet, but you know your pattern in terms of the shape you want, cut all that stuff out, prep it all. Doesn't necessarily mean like you have to be like what I'm doing now is I have everything prepped. Do I have everything prepped? Pretty much I have everything prepped except for one item. But I have those pieces that I've prepped done. And I've started to do just the rope stitch around it. And so I'm trying to do all, like, I like to do not just one side and then do the other side after. I try to do it back and forth and try to maintain the same amount of work on each piece. And so I would say if you're starting off that way, what it is that you finish one piece and then you're looking like, I got to do another thing. You know, like I got to do the purse now. But if you have all those pieces prepped, you just have to do the beadwork. You don't have to, it's almost like starting from scratch. You have to start cutting out the pattern of the purse and you got to put the velvet on and you got all these things.
Yeah, it becomes tedious in your head more.
So if you just do it all right away, then you have it for when you're done your other piece. And then it just continues with the beadwork. Now, sometimes I just get tired of the same beadwork pattern in terms of like the design. And so I might have to, that's where my procrastination comes in and I'll have to do something on the side and whatever. I'm sure my clients are like, look, she posted this thing on Instagram and she didn't even finish my stuff yet. But,
oh God, I feel like that all the time. And I put disclaimers like, it's in between orders. I'm still working on your stuff. Like, but hey, I need to sometimes. Otherwise you're not getting your stuff because I don't want to always do it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, those are, I guess, maybe some 2 little tips for tonight, for today. And, you have anything else? Like, no, we covered a lot of stuff today.
We did. We like went through our whole careers. No. That's the end of our podcast. Okay, bye. No. All right. So I think we will wrap it up for the night. We got things to do too. So now everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed, you know, all these discussions. Yeah.
And there might be some new developments for the beading table, but we're going to leave that under wraps. But just know that there could be something coming.
A little bit different. And
we just appreciate everybody listening tonight. If you're sitting at the beading table, if you're sitting at the drawing table, if you're sitting at the quill work table, just now go for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Ona.
The views and opinions of the guests expressed in this podcast do not reflect those of Udiwase and its employees.